My name is Lila, and I've spent the last 5 years climbing the corporate ladder at a company called Apex Dynamics. You'd think that after all this time, I'd have grown immune to the chaos of office politics, but no, nothing could have prepared me for what happened during my annual performance review. Let me back up just a little so you can understand how I ended up here. Sitting in my car outside the office building, clutching the steering wheel like it's the only thing keeping me from floating away into oblivion. I started as an intern straight out of college, wide-eyed and eager to prove myself. Over the years, I worked harder than anyone else on my team, staying late when others left early, volunteering for projects everyone else avoided, and learning every single detail about our clients' needs. My boss, Greg, a man who wore his confidence like armor and had an ego bigger than the entire floor we worked on, was always quick to remind us how lucky we were to be part of his team. He liked to call himself a visionary, though most people around the office whispered behind closed doors that he was more bark than bite. Still, he held power over promotions, bonuses, and career trajectories, which meant sucking up to him wasn't optional, it was survival. The day of my performance review started off normally enough, or as normal as things ever got under Greg's watchful eye. I arrived early, brewed myself a cup of coffee strong enough to keep me alert through whatever curveball he might throw my way, and sat down at my desk with my folder of accomplishments neatly organized. It wasn't arrogance that made me prepare so thoroughly, it was necessity. In a place like Apex Dynamics, where perception often outweighed reality, being able to quantify your contributions was crucial. When 10 a.m. rolled around, I knocked lightly on Greg's door before stepping inside. His office was exactly what you'd expect. Sleek furniture, framed awards lining one wall, and a massive window overlooking the city skyline. He gestured for me to sit across from him without looking up from his laptop, typing furiously, as if saving the world one email at a time. The air conditioning hummed softly in the background, doing little to ease the tension tightening my chest. "So," Greg finally said, leaning back in his chair with an exaggerated sigh. "Let's talk about you." His tone set off alarm bells immediately. It wasn't friendly, or even neutral. It carried an edge of condescension that made my stomach churn. For the next 20 minutes, he went through my file, pointing out every minor mistake I'd made over the past year while glossing over any successes. According to him, I was too slow on deadlines, even though I consistently turned work in ahead of schedule, not assertive enough in meetings, despite leading several high-profile presentations, and lacked leadership potential, though I trained 2 new hires who were now excelling. Each criticism felt like a punch to the gut, delivered with such precision that I couldn't help but wonder if he'd rehearsed them. By the time he paused to take a sip of water, tears were already pooling in my eyes. I hated crying in front of anyone, especially someone like Greg, but there was something about the sheer unfairness of it all that broke me. And then came the moment I'll never forget, the one that would change everything. Greg leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk, and smirked. "You know," he said, his voice dripping with mockery, "this is actually kind of satisfying. All those late nights, all that stress you put yourself through, worthless." Then, as if to drive the knife deeper, he stood up and did a ridiculous little victory dance right there in his office. Arms flailing, feet shuffling awkwardly, he looked like someone trying to mime joy but failing spectacularly. I stared at him, stunned. Was this really happening? Had I misjudged him completely? No, I hadn't. This was classic Greg behavior wrapped in its ugliest form. Humiliation burned hot in my cheeks, and I grabbed my folder, muttering something about needing fresh air before fleeing the room. As soon as I stepped into the hallway, I bumped into Rachel from HR. She gave me a sympathetic smile, probably noticing the redness in my eyes. "Lila," she said gently, "do you have a minute?" We ended up in her office, a cozy space decorated with motivational posters and potted plants. Rachel offered me a tissue and listened intently as I recounted everything that had just transpired. By the time I finished, I was shaking, not from sadness anymore, but from anger. How dare he treat me like that? Who did he think he was? Rachel nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you for sharing this with me, Lila. Unfortunately, you're not the first person to report similar behavior from Greg. We've been gathering information for some time now, and your account adds another layer to the picture we're building." "What happens next?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We'll need to conduct a formal investigation," she replied. "But don't worry, I'll make sure this is handled discreetly and fairly." Leaving Rachel's office, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because someone finally believed me, and dread because I knew this wouldn't end quietly. Word spread quickly in a place like Apex Dynamics, and by lunchtime, whispers filled the break room. Some colleagues offered support, while others shot me wary glances, clearly torn between loyalty to Greg and curiosity about what might happen next. That afternoon, Greg stormed into the open workspace, his face flushed with fury. "Who talked to HR?" he demanded, glaring at each of us in turn. When his gaze landed on me, I froze, my heart pounding. But instead of backing down, I met his stare head-on. If he wanted to fight, fine. I wasn't going to let him intimidate me anymore. Days turned into weeks as the investigation unfolded. Surprisingly, other employees began coming forward with their own stories about Greg's bullying tactics and manipulative behavior. What started as a personal vendetta transformed into something much larger, a reckoning for everyone who'd suffered silently under his reign. Amidst the chaos, I found unexpected solace in an unlikely source, Daniel, a quiet IT specialist who usually kept to himself. He approached me one evening after hours, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you could use this," he said with a small smile. We ended up talking for hours, sharing stories about our experiences at Apex and discovering surprising common ground. There was something comforting about his calm demeanor and sharp wit, and for the first time in ages, I felt like I wasn't alone. Daniel became my confidant, offering advice and encouragement whenever I needed it. As the pressure mounted and tensions ran high, our bond deepened. One rainy afternoon, huddled together in a corner of the cafeteria, he reached across the table and took my hand. "Whatever happens," he said softly, "we'll get through it together." And just like that, amidst the drama and uncertainty, something beautiful began to bloom. But the battle against Greg was far from over, and neither of us knew how deeply entwined our futures would become in the process. The days following Daniel's quiet declaration of support felt surreal. While the investigation into Greg loomed over everyone like a storm cloud, my relationship with Daniel grew stronger in ways I hadn't anticipated. He had always been someone on the periphery of my life, a friendly face in the hallway, or an occasional collaborator during tech-heavy projects, but now he was becoming something more. Something steady and real. We began meeting regularly after work, not just to discuss the ongoing drama at Apex Dynamics, but also to escape it entirely. Sometimes we'd grab coffee at a little cafe down the street, where the barista knew our usual orders by heart, a caramel latte for me, black coffee for him. Other times, we'd take long walks through the park near my apartment, talking about everything from childhood memories to favorite books. It wasn't love at first sight. It was slower than that, like watching a flower bloom petal by petal. But there was no denying the connection forming between us. Meanwhile, the tension at the office reached a fever pitch. Rumors swirled daily about what HR might uncover, and Greg became increasingly volatile. His once charismatic bravado gave way to thinly veiled desperation as he tried to defend himself against mounting allegations. Meetings turned into interrogations, with him deflecting blame onto anyone within earshot. "You people are ungrateful," he snapped one afternoon during a particularly heated team gathering. "I built this department from scratch." No one argued with him, at least not out loud, but the collective eye rolls told their own story. Even those who had previously feared crossing him were starting to see cracks in his armor. And yet, despite the growing evidence against him, part of me worried that nothing would come of it. After all, companies like Apex Dynamics often prioritized appearances over justice. Would they really risk tarnishing their reputation by firing such a high-profile manager? One Friday evening, as I packed up my things to leave, Rachel from HR stopped by my desk. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes betraying the stress of managing the situation. "Lila," she said quietly, motioning for me to follow her. We retreated to her office again, where she closed the door behind us before speaking. "I wanted to give you an update," she began, folding her hands on the desk. "The investigation is nearing its conclusion, and I can tell you that Greg's behavior has been problematic, to say the least. Multiple employees have corroborated your account, and some have even provided documentation of past incidents." Relief washed over me, though I couldn't help feeling cautious. "What does that mean for him?" I asked. Rachel hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "It means disciplinary action will be taken. Whether that results in termination depends on upper management's decision, but rest assured, he won't be allowed to continue unchecked." Her response left me uneasy. Disciplinary action sounded vague, almost toothless compared to the vindication I craved. Still, it was progress, a crack in the foundation of Greg's power. For now, that would have to be enough. That night, Daniel met me outside the building. He could read the mix of frustration and exhaustion on my face without needing to ask. "Want to get out of here?" he suggested, nodding toward his car. Without hesitation, I agreed. We drove to a quiet spot overlooking the city, where the lights twinkled like stars scattered across the horizon. Sitting side by side on the hood of his car, we watched the skyline shimmer in silence. Finally, Daniel broke the stillness. "You okay?" I sighed, leaning my head against his shoulder. "I don't know. Part of me wants to scream until they fire him outright, but another part knows that's probably unrealistic. At least they're doing something." He nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes something is better than nothing. Just knowing people are finally holding him accountable, that's huge." "You're right," I admitted, though doubt lingered in the corners of my mind. "But it doesn't erase everything he's done." "No," Daniel agreed softly, "and it shouldn't. But maybe this is your chance to start fresh, both professionally and personally." His words lingered in the air, planting a seed of hope I hadn't realized I needed. Maybe he was right. Maybe this mess wasn't just an ending, it could also be a beginning. The following Monday brought unexpected news. Greg had been placed on administrative leave, pending further review. The announcement sent shockwaves through the office, with reactions ranging from jubilation to disbelief. Some colleagues hugged me in the hallway, thanking me for speaking up, while others avoided eye contact altogether, clearly unsure how to navigate the shifting dynamics. In Greg's absence, leadership appointed a temporary replacement, a woman named Priya whose calm demeanor and sharp intellect inspired immediate respect. Unlike Greg, she listened intently during meetings, encouraged collaboration, and made herself accessible to everyone on the team. Under her guidance, morale slowly began to improve, and for the first time in years, I found myself genuinely excited to come to work. But just when I thought things were settling into a new rhythm, complications arose elsewhere. One afternoon, while sorting through emails, I stumbled upon a message forwarded to me by accident. It was from Greg, addressed to several members of upper management, including the CEO. In it, he accused me of fabricating stories to sabotage his career, going so far as to claim I had ulterior motives tied to personal vendettas. My stomach churned as I read his words, each sentence laced with venomous intent. Before I could process what to do next, Rachel appeared at my desk. "Lila," she said urgently, "we need to talk." Her tone sent a chill down my spine. As we walked back to her office, dread settled heavily in my chest. Inside, she closed the door and gestured for me to sit. "Greg's trying to discredit you," she explained bluntly. "He's alleging that your accusations stem from professional jealousy rather than legitimate grievances." "What?" I exclaimed, anger bubbling to the surface. "That's absurd. Every word I've said is true." "I believe you," Rachel assured me quickly. "But unfortunately, these kinds of counterclaims aren't uncommon in situations like this. They muddy the waters and force us to dig deeper." "So what happens now?" I asked, gripping the edge of the chair tightly. "We'll address it directly," she replied firmly. "But we need your cooperation and patience to ensure we handle this thoroughly. Can you trust me to guide you through this?" I nodded, though uncertainty gnawed at me. How much longer would I have to fight this battle? When would it finally end? Later that evening, Daniel joined me for dinner at my place. Over plates of pasta and glasses of wine, I vented my frustrations, tears streaming down my face as I recounted Greg's latest tactics. Instead of offering platitudes, Daniel simply held me close, letting me cry until I ran out of tears. When I finally pulled away, sniffling and embarrassed, he smiled gently. "You're stronger than him, Lila. Don't let him make you doubt that." His unwavering faith in me reignited a flicker of determination. No matter how hard Greg pushed back, I refused to let him win, not after everything I'd endured. As weeks turned into months, the investigation dragged on, testing my resolve at every turn. Yet amidst the chaos, Daniel remained a constant source of strength. Together, we navigated the ups and downs, finding solace in each other's company, even when the world around us felt uncertain. Eventually, the tide began to shift. Upper management issued a formal statement condemning Greg's behavior and announcing his permanent removal from the company. Justice, though delayed, felt sweet and vindicating. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe freely again. But just as one chapter closed, another began to unfold. With Greg gone, opportunities arose that I never expected, including a promotion to lead a key project under Priya's supervision. The role came with challenges, of course, but it also brought growth, fulfillment, and a renewed sense of purpose. Through it all, Daniel stayed by my side, cheering me on every step of the way. Our bond deepened further, evolving into something neither of us had anticipated when we first crossed paths. What started as mutual support blossomed into something profound, a partnership rooted in trust, understanding, and shared resilience. Looking back, I realized the journey wasn't just about taking down a toxic boss or proving my worth in a cutthroat corporate environment. It was about discovering who I truly was and who I wanted to become. And perhaps most importantly, It was about finding love in the unlikeliest of places, forged in the fires of adversity, and strengthened by the trials we faced together. But the story isn't over yet, because while the dust may have settled at apex dynamics, life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. And sometimes, those curveballs bring surprises you never saw coming. As the dust settled at apex dynamics, life began to feel lighter. Greg's departure marked a new era for the company, and for me. With Priya's leadership, our team thrived, and I embraced my new role with confidence. The challenges that once seemed insurmountable now felt like stepping stones toward growth. Daniel and I grew closer with each passing day. What started as friendship blossomed into something deeper, filling my life with joy I hadn't known I was missing. One evening, after a particularly long but rewarding day at work, he surprised me with a picnic under the stars. As we sat together, surrounded by twinkling lights and soft laughter, he took my hand and smiled. "You've changed everything for me, Lila," he said softly. "You make even the toughest days worth it." Tears welled up in my eyes, not from sadness, but from happiness. "You've done the same for me," I replied, squeezing his hand. And just like that, amidst the beauty of the night sky, Daniel leaned in and kissed me. It was gentle, perfect, and full of promise, a moment I'll treasure forever. In the months that followed, we built a life together filled with love, laughter, and shared dreams. At work, I continued to excel, earning recognition not just for my skills but for my ability to inspire others. Together, Daniel and I proved that even in the face of adversity, hope and happiness could prevail. It wasn't the ending I'd envisioned when I first walked into Greg's office that fateful day, but it was so much better. Life had thrown its worst at me, and yet here I was, stronger, wiser, and deeply loved. Sometimes, the hardest battles lead to the sweetest victories. And mine, it came wrapped in the warmth of a second chance, with a man who saw me, truly saw me, and loved every part of who I am.